Hi again guys, and welcome to another specific review for another car from the DLC pack. Yet again another returning car to the franchise, the original shape Lamborghini Countach. Now I need to quickly mention from today's, or actually from yesterday's review I should say, that I mentioned that a new car pack was going to be dropping. That's actually not the case. I was thinking of Forza 7, so that's just completely wrong. So, moving on. This car, the Lamborghini Countach, is a car which, in a similar way to some of the others, the RX-7 and technically the Crossbow as well in particular, is a very capable performance car already on Gran Turismo 6, but I would say of all of the cars that they've added in the pack, the Countach might be the most OP on Gran Turismo 6. It's such a good car at around the 500 pp level that not that many vehicles can actually beat it for all-round ability. There are some which can beat it through corners, some which can definitely beat it in a straight line, but very few come close for its all-round ability. So has it carried that over, given that generally speaking the numbers and the tuning and say top speed potential and stuff like that isn't quite as high in the world of GT Sport as it was on GT6. So how has that affected this car? Well, actually it hasn't affected it too badly at all. The handling is, I would say, even better now, which has kind of been the theme song of these review videos, that the cars are improved, which is exactly what you'd want them to be. But in the case of this one, it's more so the drivability which is improved, rather than necessarily how OP it is. Because unlike the KTM Crossbow, which is now OP because of GT Sport's tuning system with the N classes rather than PP levels, with the Countach it's kind of the other way round, because the Countach was OP because of the PP levels, not because of its power, because at the 500 PP level it was really good, whereas the Crossbow is good for 300 horsepower, but its PP level was always very high. So a car like this won't necessarily benefit in the same way as the KTM would from that new class system, and to some degree that's kind of the case. Now, this is still a very good performance car, it's got a ton of potential, and it always surprises me how well the Countach handles in pretty much all of its forms on Gran Turismo and also on some other racing games as well. In fact, the 25th generation Countach is one of the best handling cars in Test Drive Unlimited, for instance, which you probably wouldn't expect it to be, but it is. Lamborghinis aren't exactly known for being good handling cars. They're known for being fast, but they're also known for being pretty leery, and that's mostly from their older models like the Miura, which has a tendency to raise its front end at high speed, and of course the Diablo, which is one of the most notoriously dangerous supercars ever made. The Countach, though, it's kind of in that middle ground. It is old, but it's not difficult to drive. It's actually surprisingly forgiving. Now, as far as this car goes, you're looking at base numbers of just over 370 horsepower, just under 270 foot-pounds of torque, and it's quite light. It only weighs 1,065 kilos. And of course, on GT6 you could drop it by a healthy amount as well, as you can now, also. Well under a tonne. The horsepower per tonne is already 350 though. That's stock. That's really impressive. And that's one of the reasons why the car is as good as it is. Now, the base price on this car, before of course any mileage points that you use on tuning it, is 1.8 million. That's a lot. That's a huge price, in fact. That's a lot more than it was on Gran Turismo 6. So, should it cost that much? Well, I don't think so. If you're going to charge that much for a Countach, then why is the F40 still 450 grand? That doesn't really make much sense, especially when the Cobra, as we said before, is also 2 million. Which I would say that is a good price for the Cobra, and in a vacuum it's a good price for this car, but when you compare it to others like the Stingray, which is 50 grand, the F40, which is 450 grand, that's still totally inaccurate as far as the historical importance and ability, of course, that the car has. But with all that aside, the way in which I would say that this car is the most improved is definitely the handling and the driver feedback, which has pretty much been the case across the board with these DLC cars. In a straight line, it's not quite as quick, it's not quite as powerful, and there aren't many tracks at the moment where you really need absolute top speed from a car like this anyway. Most of that will be done by stuff like the Group 1 cars and the Group X cars, like the Tomahawk. This car, though, has more than enough acceleration to get the job done, that's for sure, and one of the best things about the car has been carried over, and that is an aspect of the handling, but much more specifically, the flow. The flow of the Countach is one of its best advantages, and it's one of the things that makes it such a competitive car and also such a dominant one, and that is you can have a car which is very lightweight or very powerful, but that won't necessarily mean that it's going to give you a good lap time. What can give you a good lap time, though, is a car which can maintain a very high average speed through corners, which is another reason why vehicles such as the Mazda RX-500, this one, the Countach, and also the notorious Suzuki GSX-R4 are so good, not just online or in career mode, but even in seasonal events. They are so quick through corners. They don't just have stereotypical good handling. In fact, in some cases, they can be quite challenging for beginners to get the best out of. The Suzuki, for instance, it's not a particularly beginner-friendly car, but when you drive it well, it's really fast. And that's because of the speed that it can take corners at, and that is a totally different thing to just having good handling, and of course many of you guys know this from experience as well. That's the great thing about the Countach, and now, thanks to GT Sport, I would say that it solidifies the combination of the two more than ever. On GT6, it was already fast through corners, but now it's fast through corners and has genuinely good handling, because having great cornering speed on GT6 didn't necessarily mean that I thought it was a great handling car. It was a very fast car, but I also found it to be a little bit flighty. Let's put it that way. It floats around a little bit. It's got those skinny little tyres, the high suspension, no downforce. It's not exactly ideal for cornering, which was always why it was so surprising to me that it was so good for it. Now, you can still feel that to some degree, but it feels a lot better. So overall, despite the huge price, which is a whole lot more expensive than it was on GT6, if I remember correctly, I think it was 216 grand on that game, and I think the other Countach was 182 or something like that. It was one or the other, but it's a whole lot more either way than it was then. So if you do get the chance to pick it up, definitely do so if you can spare the cash. If, though, you're looking to buy a car for that kind of money specifically, well, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going for the Countach first, because there are definitely better cars and faster cars for a much lower price, but it is a very good car in its own right anyway. It's definitely one of the strongest classics in the game. In fact, at the moment, comparing it to something like, and I'm talking true old classics, not stuff like the F40, I mean like 70s and earlier, if you compare it to other cars like that currently, such as the Stingray and the Cobra, I would say this is probably the best classic in the game in terms of all-round ability. So, certainly worth a look, and that's it for this particular pick. So I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.